joined by Dave, Matt, and Mike, who I'll let them introduce themselves briefly here before we dive into our some of the questions that we have to dig into this topic with you all. So Dave, do you want to kick us off and let us know who you are, where you're coming from, and in particular, what makes the product that you build so mission critical?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much, Sam. Thanks for having me today. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So I'm Dave Nazzaro. I'm the head of hardware engineering and advanced technologies for Insulet Corporation. We make the Omnipod. It's a small patch pump that's designed to serve folks who have diabetes. It's a small product about the size of an egg cut in half that diabetics wear for 3 days to deliver insulin, specific to different insulin requirements. We recently just actually got a 510K clearance for our full closed loop system we call Omnipod 5, which will help patients and diabetics control their diabetes that much better. I've been with Insulet for roughly 7.5 years, and prior to that, I had the great privilege to work with Sam and Anna at Apple as a design engineer on the first gen Apple Watch. So, yeah, and
good to get your contrasting experience there.
Yeah, I think there's some very similar challenges to volume. We make extremely high volume of this product, and reliability is first and foremost. Quality. When patients open the package and put this device on, it needs to work, and it needs to stay working, for the entire duration of use. And I'm hoping to really dive into some of that a little bit today with you guys. Talk about some of the things that we do to make sure that patients have a great experience with our product.
Perfect. Thank you. Mike, how about you?
Hey, good afternoon or good evening to anyone that's tuning in. My name is Mike Sternowski, representing L3 Harris. I've been with that company now for 15 years, working specifically in a part of the business called communication systems, where we develop tactical radio systems for both our domestic and international partners. And just to give you a little bit of insight into what a tactical radio really means, this is similar to the capability of a cell phone, but one that does not require any infrastructure whatsoever, and provides some of the highest encryption that's available to secure the communications for our forward deployed troops. And so, you can imagine in this environment when you're out and you're in the middle of nowhere, maybe on the front lines of a country, not to be named right now, but trying to establish communications with your peers, to be able to do that in an environment where there's either jamming, hostile jamming, or non-purposeful jamming, but also just the environmental factors that are there. We build a product that can withstand that rigor and do it very securely. So I've been at this now for over 15 years, as I mentioned, and learning something new every single day about how to continue to drive the technology forward, but also doing it in a very rapid manner. Our customers are very interested in getting things to market as quickly as possible, as you can imagine, to be able to leverage those capabilities. So I'm looking forward to talking a little bit.
We'll definitely dive into that. Great. And Matt, last but not least, do you want to introduce yourself? And I think we've already got some guesses as to what makes Intuitive Surgical's products critical, but we'll let you highlight it.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Ohline. I'm the Senior Director of Process Engineering for Intuitive Surgical's Endoluminal Business Unit. Intuitive Surgical makes robots for surgery, the Da Vinci being the sort of best known product, but also has a couple of other product lines and business units, one of which is pretty new, launched a product about 2 years ago, and that's our endoluminal ion system, which is for taking biopsies in the lung, which is a really challenging clinical application. And as Sam was alluding to, it's pretty important that our devices are functional and reliable when they ship. When you're doing surgery on a patient, we like to imagine that it's being done on a member of our own family or a very close friend, just as a way of sort of bringing home the point that every single one of these procedures is really important, and our devices need to function as designed every time. So it makes data and especially machine vision and now ML especially critical for our success.
Got it. So we have the motivation, and I want to start by going down maybe a thread that Dave, you started to go down there. I come from the consumer electronics industry. Many folks in the audience do as well. And it's one thing if a laptop hinge were to fail, but it's another if a medical device or an emergency radio fails in the field. And so, help us understand what are the steps that you take in the design process or the test process to help meet that higher bar that's required. And Dave, maybe we can get your perspective first.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. So being in a highly regulated environment, just like the others here, Michael and Matt, we have some solid blueprints on how to navigate ourselves within our own design control processes. The standards and various testing is known to the product space that we operate in. But we use, real world test cases. We've used failures of predicate products, things that are already out in the world, customer feedback, clinical data. All these things feed how we come up with our test cases and essentially our test suite. We have experts that have been in the industry for a very long time. And some of those folks actually participate in writing the standards with the FDA. And, we have close collaboration with our regulating bodies to ensure that we've really covered the full gamut. In the volumes that we operate, much like Apple, the edge cases, the corner cases, those things are actually a real thing for us. And if we even have one customer that has an adverse experience, it's a big deal to us. So, we try to be very diligent, and sometimes that takes more time to launch a product, but we are dedicated to getting it right and making sure that safety is really what we're leading with every time we launch a product. So that's some of the things that we think about when we are testing and designing the products.
Got it. And on the design side, how do you make sure that if something does go wrong in the field, that it doesn't result in an adverse incident?
Yeah, Sam, that's a great question. So we've designed multi-point failure modes into the product. So we have lots of checks and balances that are happening. And when any of those bits of the system detect the fault, the system is able to safely alarm and let the patient know that something's gone wrong with the product. And we have multiple ways of doing that. Our devices work in a connected ecosystem. So there's always a handheld that they'll have. Even if something was to happen to the on-pod alarm, we still have another means to letting that patient know that something's gone wrong. And that's led us in the direction of safety for the years that we've had our products on the market. But we're always looking to improve because Insulet's main focus is to have a very discreet product. So you can imagine alarms can become disruptive. So we're even looking at ways to solve some of those problems into the future, to allow customers and patients to still have the best experience, but also the most safe experience.
Great, thank you. And Mike, I'm curious from in a different industry, your perspective on how do you enhance your design and test processes for the reliability that's required?
Lots of testing. So I think a lot of people that come into our factories are really taken aback by the level of testing that goes into each one of these products. For 45 minutes of assembly time, we're probably doing 6x that in parametric test time to ensure that every channel, every frequency across the board is getting the ultimate performance that we expect and what our customers expect. But we also, shifting beyond that into the development cycle, just quite a bit of design verification testing goes into these radios before we release them to the field, along with a host of field testing. There's oftentimes things that we just simply can't simulate in a test environment. And so bringing that product out into the field and really exercising it in the manner that our customers are going to experience the product. And then the lessons learned at the end. So, when we do have things out in the field and we start to get the feedback from our customers, it's how we start taking that information and feeding it back into either the next firmware release or the next variant of the product so that we can always get better.
Got it. Thank you. And Matt, I know Intuitive does a lot of automation as part of your process, and how does that factor into the design and test aspect of your manufacturing line?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's something that grows naturally out of increasing volumes over time. So you would probably not start with highly automated manufacturing when you're releasing your first new product and shipping 10 or 20 or 100 of something. But as Intuitive has grown over 25 years of building the robotic surgical market, we now make tens of millions of accessory products and millions of surgical instruments. And at those volumes, it makes more and more sense to automate. So what we found is that it's very challenging, and this is no secret, it's very challenging to take a product that was not designed for automation and automate it with reliable results. It's something where some concurrent engineering and designing for automation while designing the automation systems concurrently really has the best result. And so as Intuitive has grown, and in recent years, we've been enjoying great success from doing more of that. Just accommodating the automation and inspection techniques that are industry standard, as opposed to having to really, invent new things as we go to be successful with designs that were never really intended for automation.
Got it. And maybe as a segue there, it sounds like testing was a big aspect of I think everyone's approach here. And in the theme of today, I'm curious if you can share with us, what role does that data that you collect from those test lines or even the field testing that you do, what role does that data play in your manufacturing process? And ideally, if you could give us an example of how that helps drive a key decision. And maybe, Matt, we can continue with that thread.
Sure. I'm not sure this exactly relates to the question precisely, but I'll give one anecdote. In one of our automated systems, it does require some interaction with technicians and operators, and we do our best to make sure that everything is poka-yoke or foolproof. So parts only go in one way. You can only test things one way. But man, people are clever, and they find ways around your best efforts to prevent this. And we realized there was one operator who'd found a way around our approach to ensuring the test was performed consistently every time. And then the question came up, okay, well, how many products are affected, right? How many units have we manufactured with this particular issue? Our approach to data is collect everything, organize everything, and that enables you to ask these kinds of questions later. Some of that data might be something you want to look at continuously or daily or weekly, but the rest of it you need around for issues like this that come up. You never know what questions you're going to need to ask. So we're able to use that data to bracket exactly which units were impacted by this, and fortunately, it's a very small number. In a worst case, if we didn't have that data, we might have had to do a very large recall to say, hey, we're just not sure these were tested correctly, so bring them all back. Cost of something like that, not just in goodwill of your customers, but actual financial costs could be millions or tens of millions.
Yeah, that's a story that resonates, where the resolution of the data that you have can limit that scope.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Absolutely. Although I will say it was a manual process to look at that data. So your new tools sound like they might have been useful in a case like that, where it took us a few days to get the answers.
Got it. Thank you. So Mike, how about on the more defense side? What is your approach to data collection, and how have you used that in your experience?
Yeah, I'd have to second what Matt said. Look, we collect it all. Everything is important to us, and then the challenge of contextualizing that data. And I think where we're at in the progression of our manufacturing processes and maturity is really starting to look across data silos, right? And how do we start to mux together our AOI data along with our parametric and our ICT and start to build inferences off of the correlations that we're seeing. So, continuing to expand that out. And the other thing I wanted to add in here, Sam, if I just go back into, what Milo had said in her presentation around, access to data and the challenges that we all have. I think in manufacturing, we actually sit on a treasure chest of data. I mean, you can imagine when we go through design processes, we often get maybe 10, 15, 30 pieces that we're using in testing. Resident within manufacturing, we just have a host of information. And so I think it's really behooving upon us as manufacturers to figure out how to feed that data back into the design process, because it really is insightful if we can start to contextualize it with respect to the performance of our products.
Great. Got it. Thank you. And Dave, I guess maybe even more so as a medical device product that sees a lot of use in the field, what does that data do? And how do you take advantage of not just the data from your manufacturing line, but downstream further?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, just like the others have alluded to, we collect all the data upstream, but our device actually collects data and diagnostics as well. So we learn a lot by getting product back from the field. If there's a failure, we obviously dissect the device and we learn what happens. We get a lot of information from complaint centers and things like that. We're constantly listening to our patients, and that's allowing us to dig into the data deeper as we need to. And every complaint to us is important. So we've collected all the failure data and trends, and we know the nuances of our product. If there's any seasonality things like static electricity, for example, we know that's going to be a higher likelihood for an ESD charge during the winter months, right? So we try to be very mindful of just how the product's used. I'm not going to rehash everything that the other guys said, but we collect every single step of manufacturing data, and we also test 100% of our product in some manner to allow us to give products to our customers that we have the utmost confidence that they'll peel open the package and it's going to work every time for them.
Got it. Thank you. And one thing that I'm curious about coming from the consumer space, and maybe one bias that I have, is that there's a lot of regulation for each of your industries, and often for good reason, but that creates a perception of perhaps it's slowing down the design and development of new products. And I'm curious on your perspectives of, is that true, or how have you countered that in your industries? And maybe Mike, we could get your perspective first here.
Yeah, within the production of tactical radios and just the development of tactical radios, we do have our own set of government regulations that we have to adhere to. And some of the most common are really around the mechanical enclosure and when it's subjected to either altitude or temperature or these other factors. It does raise the bar for us in terms of what we need to do on the design side, but it's also the template. It's kind of the recipe as to how we're going to get to a resilient product. And so we embrace it. We've been involved with, and I think David mentioned this earlier, sitting on the boards in some instances and helping to influence the requirements that are being generated. But again, it really is part of the course for us. I mean, we need to be intimately involved to observe the end product that we're really shooting for when we're going through a development process.
Got it. And maybe to pull on that thread with Dave and continue that theme of getting involved with the regulation up front, how have you approached that, and what's sort of the impact that it has on your design process or validation process?
Yeah, there's we work closely with an AAMI organization, which sets up a number of working groups, and those working groups are broken down in different functions of products. There's things that range from electronics to sterilization and everything in between. So we work to basically delegate parts of our organization, to sit on these boards. Usually they're very happy to have representation from the field because we bring a lot of this knowledge into these working groups, and we essentially will write the standards or we'll edit the standards. They evolve. They actually evolve kind of slow, but it's for a good reason, because there's a lot of nuances and details that need to get captured appropriately, because they will be governing the safety of products, into the future. So I have personally participated in these standards committees myself, and they're great ways of learning lots of little details that you otherwise maybe would have missed. And you hear about these things long before the standards release, which I think is great. And it's also an excellent way to network with people who are trying to solve the same kind of problems you are. So I highly recommend anyone that's, whether in a regulated environment or not, if you are leveraging standards, to get involved. They will appreciate hearing your inputs. And I think it's great just to see, you contributing to something that's going to touch more than just the product that you work on.
Thank you. And Matt, I'm curious if you have anything to add on how to handle operating in this regulated environment and still move quickly.
Yeah. So two thoughts. Along the lines of what David and Michael are saying, the more you know about the regulations, the more quickly you can execute and work through them. My personal opinion is that in the medical device industry, the regulations are essential. It's very important that medical devices are safe and effective, which is what the FDA's objective is. And really what the FDA imposes through law on medical device companies is a requirement to be rigorous, to prove your claims are true, and to prove that your devices function the way they are required to, right? So your own requirements, you need to meet your own requirements. I think that's what well-run businesses should do anyway. We just happen to have to do it because the law requires it as well. So I think Intuitive's approach to that is probably common across successful medical device companies, is to staff your company with people who know their domain inside and out and can execute effectively and quickly, even though the regulations can actually be very extensive, right? There's a lot to it. But if everybody knows how to navigate it and how to complete things successfully, you can move pretty fast. Great, and if you don't know that, it is very slow. So it can be very painful.
And to that first point around, I think that appreciation for regulation is an interesting one. Does that extend, Mike, in your experience, to your industry as well?
We embrace all of the standards. I don't often hear pushback or, the challenge of this. We're well aware of them. And again, it is the roadmap to an assured product. I mean, if you're not following that, you're likely not meeting the requirements that you need to be meeting. And so I think where often we are challenged is within those requirements, making sure that our testing is kind of well aligned with what the requirements are ultimately driving, because there is some leeway sometimes. That would be my take on regulation within tactical communications business.
Great. I think one last topic to take us home here. And each of you has been helping your companies optimize manufacturing for some time now. And when you look over your experiences, what advice would you highlight? What would you give to product design engineers in your field? And maybe Mike, we can start with you here.
Work with your manufacturing partners. I think I started saying it before. Just the amount of experience and access to data that we can provide back to that development team is really something that's untapped, at least in my business. And I would probably suggest that exists more widespread, as we saw the challenges that Anna had outlined in the previous presentation there. And then the other element is, design for manufacturing assembly. You can build the best product with the best performance in a laboratory, but it means nothing if you can't get it into the hands of a soldier in our case. And so really being able to look at manufacturing as partners for enablement of getting something to market, and not, just that black box that we pass through at the end to finally deliver a capability to our customers.
Got it. Yeah, I think that theme also resonated in Marla's talk around engagement across the team as well.
It warmed my heart to hear Milo speak, and it was just point on to a lot of what I've experienced in my career. And so it was also, very nice to see that it is systemic, right? We all deal with this as members of the manufacturing community.
Yeah. Dave, do you want to add on to that, or any other advice you would add to?
Yeah, I mean, I second a lot of what Michael said there. I guess I'll plug the old cliche, involve them early, right? Like involve them in the design process and don't just wait to the end to get feedback. I mean, sometimes you'll get great feedback, but other times you'll look back and say, wow, we could have saved a lot of time if we had just gone through this together earlier, right? And don't be afraid to prototype in like materials and like tooling, right? You have to get those learnings sooner, or else you could be basically wasting time, valuable time to market. And a lot of that does come down to dollars and cents. But I think to Matt's point, hiring, really qualified people that are experts in their domain, you're going to want to give them the money to do this work. And you want everybody involved early, because at the end, we're going to get a better product. And the one thing we didn't talk about is design for cost. Cost is a big driver in a lot of what we do. And, I think if you get it right, you got yourself a great product that, customers love, patients love, and a product that can really sustain a business. Because if the business isn't healthy, they're not going to be getting their products, for the long term. So I guess, that's kind of my last input on what Michael had said there.
Great, thank you. And Matt, how about you? Any advice for engineers in the field?
It's going to be the same as what Michael and Dave said. I'll add one tiny bit to it. So yeah, I think the term that applies here is concurrent engineering. And it applies in pretty much every field. The way I think about it is the time required to design manufacturing equipment is very close to the time required to design a product. And the time to specify and produce a part is pretty close to the time required to design the product. So if all of these are running concurrently and the information is being shared back and forth about optimal solutions, you will ideally reach that finish line and launch the product together with parts that are easy to manufacture, low cost, high yield, and assembly processes that achieve the same goals. And ultimately, what results from that is the ability to take your teams, which you're paying quite a lot, as David mentioned, and put them on the next opportunity, right? You're not shackled to that product that has a lot of issues that you need to clean up after the fact. You get a lot more opportunity as a result.
Got it. Well, thank you all so much. I think we had some great themes coming out of this conversation, including collecting all of that data to make good use of it to ensure the reliability of products, as well as breaking down silos. I think that's another great lesson that we've heard a couple of times today. So thank you each for being here and for sharing with us the insights that you've gained. I hope you stick around and are able to enjoy the rest of the conversation today and meet other folks here. And thank you both, or thank all three of you.